in the eastern parts of the country. This is a confrontation between the army and the people, and there are new reinforcements coming into Benghazi, led by Gaddafi's own son Khamis, to crush the revolt in Benghazi. In Tripoli, there are groups trying to gather and go and protest against the spilling of blood of Libyans in the eastern province, and they are peaceful people. They have no guns, no ammunition, no weapons at all, and they want to simply say, you know, stop the bloodshed in the east, where at least 300 people have been killed and many wounded. So that's one aspect. There's also in the many cities in the west, including Zintan, Gherian, Zawiya, Misrata. These are all have seen protesters in the streets and have seen the army or the military power meeting them in the streets.
So it's not just confined to the eastern cities then, as we've been reporting for the most part. So you're saying that it is in certain western cities as well. Does it? Is there the potential for this to explode further to something far bigger and perhaps to Tripoli?
This is the most countrywide, the most widespread revolt against Gaddafi ever, and it's still growing. The people have reached a point of no return by the killing of the Libyans in Benghazi and in Beda and in other parts. So the situation now has become irreversible as far as the people are concerned. They are going all the way, but also the regime is coming stronger onto the people.
Ian Black in London, does this fit in with some of what you've been hearing as well, that this isn't just confined to the eastern cities of Libya?
Well, clearly information is coming out in all sorts of ways. The situation's pretty confused, but we do hear more and more that things are spreading. It's obviously been concentrated in the east, in the Benghazi area, and of course people have pointed all the time to the significance of that being a long way from Tripoli, and the big question being whether the trouble, the unrest, the violence will spread to the capital. It's very hard to make a judgment about it because of the very fragmentary nature of the information and reports that, although often very vivid, can't be verified and can't be quantified. And the casualty figures do seem to be going up, and every day that this has been going on, what seemed perhaps like a large or inflated figure in the afternoon or the evening was actually under the figure that was arrived at by the following morning. So there's an element of time lag as well as information is collated and disseminated. But I agree with Shamis, this seems to be quite the most serious threat to the Gaddafi regime in all the 41 years that he's been in power.
But do you think, sorry to interrupt, do you think that this has, as he was saying earlier, do you think that this has reached the point of no return, that there's no going back now for people there?
I mean, I honestly think it's impossible to say. People are obviously, you know, furious, angry, full of fury at what their own government has done to them. But whether it's possible for this to somehow to subside and for people to be placated with measures from central government, it's hard to say. Very interesting, I thought today, to see the appeal by Libyan religious leaders for an end to the violence, suggesting perhaps that was something that the regime would have to take notice of. It's very hard to get a sense of independent voices being able to influence the very idiosyncratic Libyan system anyway. So any evidence of people saying, look, this has got to stop, this is enough, who aren't actually themselves the target of state violence, must be significant in some way. I mean, the other thing is that in the last 24 hours, the world has woken up to this. Maybe at the beginning it was not paid very much attention. There was what's been going on in Bahrain at the same time, Bahrain being much more accessible and in a much more strategic location than the remote towns of eastern Libya. But I think overnight we've seen Western governments, in Britain certainly, waking up to the dimensions of this. So how much longer this can be sustained is hard to say. So I don't know whether a line has been crossed that's irreversible. I cannot say myself.
Ali Khan Sachu, Libya is perhaps not as politically significant in the region as Egypt is, but economically it certainly is. It sits on the largest known oil reserves in Africa. How much of that is a factor in all of this? And can this regime, given the vast amounts of oil wealth they have, can they perhaps use any of that to pacify the situation there?
Can I contextualize it and start off by saying, if you look at the North African arc starting from Egypt all the way to Nigeria, Libya has 75% of the known oil reserves, estimated to be about 47.3 billion barrels of oil, which is in excess of $4 trillion in the ground. On top of that, they control, it is said, FX reserves of about 100 billion. And given the nature of the Hermit Kingdom, the fact that information does not come out, I suspect that number is a serious undercount of the types of dollars that Colonel Gaddafi has in his in his purse. So they're a big player, and you can see that play out in so many different ways. Not so long ago, Hannibal, one of Colonel Gaddafi's sons, got in trouble in Switzerland. Colonel Gaddafi threatened a run on the Swiss banking system, and he got an abject apology within 24 hours. Furthermore, Libya is heavily invested in places like Italy. Colonel Gaddafi has sort of spread his tentacles in a very, very clever way. He might look idiosyncratic, he might appear quite extraordinary and clownish, but when you look at his maneuvers in the financial markets, they've been very, very clever, quite astute, and always pushing the boundaries of Libya's power play. With respect to the economy, I think it's been a fiefdom for so long. It's been run as the personal property of Gaddafi Inc. And I think it's very difficult for such a regime to make the types of concessions at the speed with which the 21st century requires. And I would question whether he is ready himself to make those concessions. You know, psychologically, I don't know where he is right now. You know, does he think that these are ingrates who are rising up against him and they need to be put down? It's interesting that he's using the sub-Saharan African militias, because there are about 500,000 Africans within Libya out of the 6.5 million population, and he's extended enormous influence in Africa as well. So my point would be, yes, he can make the concessions, but I wonder whether after 41 years in power, he has the skill set to make those concessions that are required at this time. And he, for example, might very well think it's a black box. It's been a black box all these years, a black hole of information. And I think we're first going to see a move towards a much more violent response. You don't have a live feed there, for example, which I think was the game changer in Egypt. But overall, he's got a lot more money in his hand. He's got